Well, I first of all would like to welcome all of you, and I'd like to thank First Baptist Church for the opportunity to hold this event here. I'd like to first say that this is one of the warmest, most lovely congregations that I've been in. Every time I've come here, and I've been a guest preacher here a few times over the last X amount of years, I've always been so warmly received. And then when I'm not preaching here and I come here and visit, I also am equally warmly received, and it's just a really nice experience being here in a very inclusive community where there's so much love that is exuded from the congregants here. And so I thank you all, those members of First Baptist Church, for allowing me to be here. John Deere is known for his many books. He's written 30, maybe 40 books. They keep on coming, and they're good. They're thoughtful. They're mindful. His teachers represent a wide array of people who have had huge influence on our culture and on our thinking in the United States. But not just on the United States or in the United States, but around the world. His teachers have included the Berrigans, Daniel particularly. They have included Mahatma Gandhi. He read all of the letters of Mahatma Gandhi, became a student of nonviolence under Mahatma Gandhi, and is deeply influenced by Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. These are the major influences of John's life in terms of those who have gone before him a little bit, although he was still alive. He's younger than I am, but still alive, who have also influenced him greatly. And we share in the love of Henry Nouwen, and we share in the love of some of the other persons who have also influenced us, like Walter Wink. So we have a lot that we can talk about together because they were influential in our lives, and we know those men and Dorothy Day and have been influenced by them. John is going to be speaking to you tonight about a culture of nonviolence. This is going to be an interactive opportunity because we want you to also feel free to share some of your ideas and thoughts and what you think. John is going to be presenting, but John, like me, is like, okay, what do you think? And so on. So there'll be an opportunity a little bit later after John speaks to you about what you think about nonviolence and creating a culture of nonviolence. We think we can do that. And John, I'm not going to go into all of your credits, but I will say that John has been nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize by Bishop Desmond Tutu, and that John also is recognized as one of the premier people working in nonviolence across the world. John also pays for this, pays for it in terms of not always being accepted and embraced. Because speaking about nonviolence is often an insight toward violence. We are so steeped in violence in so many ways that to hear a dramatic presentation about nonviolence is jarring to us. And so John doesn't mind getting our attention, like Martin King got our attention. And so he comes to us tonight with this passion for nonviolence, and he has been arrested numerous times because of it. So John, I welcome you as my friend and brother, good Jesuit, but now diocesan priest, a man who absolutely helps us understand the powers that be and then stands against the powers. John Deere.
Thanks for welcoming me here, Steve. Thank you so much, and Rebecca and Mark and everyone. It's really nice to be here. Wow, I don't feel that sorry for you living in Manchester, Vermont. I come from New Mexico, where everything is brown. There's no nothing green. And is it always this sunny and cool and pleasant? I figure, Carol. A lot of the time. Good answer. Yeah, it's really great. Well, yeah, so maybe I could just share some of my stories and journey with you and talk about nonviolence and this idea of a vision of a culture of peace and nonviolence, and then we can have a conversation. Doesn't it sound? And then everybody has to buy a book. No, I'm only kidding. I'm 57, and I've been working at this, like a lot of you, for peace and justice, most of my life. I mean, I don't know, Steve or Rebecca, I thought, even as a child, that the spiritual life or life itself was just so wonderful. And it was a journey of peace and love and life. In other words, you make peace with yourself, you make peace with your families, you make peace with the earth and peace with everybody. And life is a journey on the road to peace, toward the God of peace, and a new future of peace and a new world of peace. And I still think that's the meaning of life. But that's not what we're about. We're barreling down the highway of war, violence. And if while I'm talking, it's helpful, you can reflect on your own life within that hermeneutic, that vision of peace. In other words, where are you on the road to peace? How has your life been a journey from the culture of war toward a new culture of peace, toward the God of peace and future of peace? It's a nice way to look at life. How has, used Gandhi King language, how are you turning from violence and more walking the path of nonviolence? And from this night till the day of your death, how can you go deeper and contribute to our culture, a new world of nonviolence? That's the way I think. And we're all victims of violence, but we're all on this journey toward a new world of nonviolence. I was telling Steve, I was a wild college kid at Duke in the 70s, and it's a long, sad story, Steve, but I got knocked off the fraternity bar stool, decided to give my life to Jesus, like St. Paul, and I'm trying to make you laugh, and it's not working here.
And also with you.
And anyway, I thought, well, then you have to become a Jesuit. So I went and told that to my mother. Yeah, she was as horrified as you are. She said, please, no, wait. And I thought, oh, I can wait a year. And I thought, well, what do I want to do? I thought, well, I was telling Steve this story this afternoon. Well, if I'm going to give my life following this guy, I should go and see where he lived. So I go to my parents. Mind you, I'm a dopey 21-year-old kid. Mom, Dad, I'm going to go hitchhiking through Israel for 3 months to see where Jesus lived. My mother was like, it's worse than we thought. And the week I left, Israel invaded Lebanon. Do you remember the summer war of 1982, May of 1982? And I researched it for my autobiography out there. It was all orchestrated at the Pentagon. We killed 60,000 people in 3 months. All the Holy Land tour groups were canceled. There were no tourists there. And I hitchhiked through Israel like a dopey, naive kid. I haven't really changed that much, as you see, Steve. I mean, my goal was to camp out at I thought he'd laugh, but he's agreeing with me. I was camping, the goal was to camp out at the Sea of Galilee. I'm trying to tell you what happened to me. And it was spectacular, if you've been there. It's just this big lake, green hills. There's a hill on the north side of the Sea of Galilee. I don't know if you've been there, Rebecca. There's a church the size of this room, little small church. And there was nobody around, literally for miles. And I walk into it on a Wednesday afternoon, I'll never forget, and there it said, like graffiti on the wall of the church, "Blessed are the poor in spirit." And I thought, what is that about? And then I'm looking around the room. It's, blessed are those who mourn. Blessed are the meek, the gentle, the nonviolent. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for justice. Blessed are the merciful. Blessed are the pure in heart. Blessed are the peacemakers. Blessed are those persecuted for justice. And on the altar it said, love your enemies. It's the chapel of the Beatitudes, commemorating the Sermon on the Mount. And a light went on. I mean, I was like, and I said out loud in the church, "Oh my God, I think he's serious." This was a big setback. It was like, it was mythic for me in my life. And I walked out on the balcony, and after you've been on a holy pilgrimage, you get wackier than usual. I'm talking to God, and I'm going, "Are you telling me this is what you want me to do? Like, isn't this the job of like the Pope or somebody?" Like, I was telling you, my plan was to be a pious Jesuit, which is an oxymoron, I realize, but I have to hunger and thirst for justice, be a peacemaker, love my enemies. That's the job description of every Christian. And I thought, and I had this great idea, and I said, okay, I'll give my life to the Beatitudes and the Sermon on the Mount. I promise, right here, right now, on one condition. If you give me a sign. And I put my fist in the back. And Steve, it was brilliant because I found a loophole, you don't get signs now, but I could say I tried. All of a sudden, there were these loud explosions, and 3 huge black Israeli jets fell from the sky, breaking the sound barrier, setting off sonic booms, swooped over me, over the Sea of Galilee, and dropped a whole bunch of bombs, killing people. And it changed my life. And I've thought about that moment till tonight. And I think for a split second in reflection now, I opened my eyes in case God appeared. And what did I see? The reality of the world, which is mass murder. Sisters and brothers killing sisters and brothers all over the planet like it's perfectly normal, even at the place where Jesus said, "Love your enemies and blessed are the peacemakers." I saw it with my own eyes. I invite you to remember that story and ponder the meaning of it. And I thought, right, I'm going to get with the program. And 2 weeks later, I'm sitting at the feet of Daniel Berrigan, my teacher and friend who just died in April. You all know the Berrigans. We talked about them, these great heroes. And, Steve, if you're friends of the Berrigans, it's like a work. But if you were, it's a requirement to get arrested within 24 hours. And Phil was like, "Go get arrested at the Pentagon, kid, and report back." And I was like, okay. And yeah, now I've been arrested about 80 times, and I'm an ex-con, and I can't vote. I'm not allowed in Canada and a lot of countries, and I'm highly monitored by the government. Thank you very much. No, it's been a lifetime of, like, from Dan, learning about what it means to be a Christian and seeing from him as to be a peacemaker. And that's took me very quickly to live in El Salvador, the height of the war, with all the Jesuits who were later killed. They were my friends. And then in war zones all over the world, including Iraq and recently Afghanistan, to walking onto the Seymour Air Force Base in North Carolina with Philip Berrigan. We went right through the middle of, we didn't know it, but national war games. We just walked right through 10,000 soldiers, came up to one of the big fighter bombers that can carry nuclear weapons, and we each pulled out a hammer and went up to the side of it, and I hammered once, as you do. And there I'm quickly standing before the judge, and I'm saying, "Your Honor, Rebecca," I said to her, "I'm just doing what it says in the Bible. Someday these people are going to come along and beat swords into plowshares. Jesus, I'm just trying to obey, Your Honor, I'm just trying to obey the teaching in the gospel from Jesus. Love your enemy, don't nuke them." That's the actual translation from the original Greek. He didn't like that all either. I'm trying to make you laugh, and it's not working here. But for that act, I faced 20 years in prison. I'm just telling you some of my journey. 20 years in prison. And I was in a little tiny cell with Philip Berrigan. We never left it, not for 9 months. He was in the bottom bunk, I was in the top bunk. We had a toilet. The food came through the door. It was incredible. It was horrific. And we as kids had memorized Martin Luther King's speeches. And he said at one point in his speech in Detroit, I can imitate him. We will transform those dungeons of despair and darkness into havens of hope and harmony. And I'm going, I don't think so, Martin, you know. But we had nothing, only my glasses. That after 6 weeks, my lawyer was Ramsey Clark, the former Attorney General. It took him 6 weeks to get us a Bible. We started with Mark chapter 1, verse 1. And Rebecca, it was like the heavens opened and the angel said, now this is what I meant. I learned more about the scriptures in prison than all my graduate studies. And then, you know, remember in the airplanes you used to get a little plastic cup of grape juice? We got one of those once a week. And we found that if you hid the grape juice in the top of the toilet, it ferments quite nicely over time. And
Holy Communion wine.
we were given a piece of Wonder Bread for breakfast. So we broke the bread and passed the cup. And it was like Jesus was right there with us. It was the greatest experience of my life. I live in New Mexico now, which is the poorest state in the country, #1 in military spending, #1 in nuclear weapons. There are 1,900 nuclear weapons at the Albuquerque airport, more than any place on the planet. #1 in child hunger, drunk driving, suicide, domestic violence, worst education. And at Los Alamos, the beautiful mountaintop where they build the atomic bomb at the labs, there are more PhDs and millionaires per capita than any place on the planet. And that's why I'm there. We have a campaign to close Los Alamos. So it was nice knowing you. Wish me luck with that. You know, I was telling Steve today that I keep going back to what Martin Luther King said the night before the government killed him. April 3rd, 1968 in Memphis. The choice is no longer violence or nonviolence. It's nonviolence or non-existence. Unless the whole world becomes nonviolent, we're doomed to our self-destructive violence. That's the teaching, the last words of the great prophet to us. And I think that's what we're going through up till tonight. And what are we going to do about that? How do we help everybody become nonviolent and to work for a new culture of nonviolence, a new world of nonviolence? That's our only hope. And that's what you all are doing. I think Vermont is a very important place. I was saying that to you, Steve, and I don't know if you agree with that, or maybe you do think that, or you're nonchalant about it. Why should you get involved when you live in paradise here? Because you don't see the struggles that are happening every day that we're watching on TV. No, you can be leaders to this country and to keep upholding the vision of a culture of nonviolence. So what does that all mean? I use the word nonviolence, which is complicated, I grant you. But Martin Luther King used it every day of his life. Gandhi used it every day of his life. I don't use the word peace so much. In Los Alamos, Steve, I addressed the high school there. These kids are saying to me, now mind you, they're growing up on a radioactive waste dump. Their parents build nuclear weapons and they're all millionaires. They're brainwashed. And the kids were saying to me, our families have taught us that we are the greatest people for peace on the planet because we build nuclear weapons. We're protecting the earth. I think that it's the greatest terrorist training camp on the planet. You know, it's the end of the world there. Or the word love. Rebecca, I don't know how you preach about that because the English language is so poor, I think. You know, I love my car. But nobody is using the word nonviolence. So it just makes everybody mad, so I'm sticking with it. I know that doesn't work as well. Here's what I think, how it works. And the real question is, how do you define it? Steve, how do you define it? And I have found in working with groups and churches around the country, when people start using this word, things can happen because it's right there, no violence. But I grant it's clumsy. I think it begins with a vision of the heart that sees, if you're with me, every human being on the planet is your very sister and brother. That's the key to the whole vision, the biblical vision, the gospel vision. All 7.2 billion people, equal to your blood brothers and sisters, we're all one. We're actually already reconciled. Actually, the gift of peace has already been given to us. And the deeper you can go into the spiritual truth of reality, our common unity, the more it widens that we're one with all the creatures on the earth, on the universe, you realize You can never hurt anyone ever again, much less kill someone, or sit back and be silent in the face of so much violence and death in the world. Tonight, 35 wars happening, 16,000 nuclear weapons good to go. The United Nations says 800 million people are starving. It's an incredible statistic. Up to 4 billion people in subhuman extreme poverty. Catastrophic climate change now bearing down upon us. This whole culture of violence and war that leads all of the violence that you're seeing and resisting in your own work. Racism, sexism, torture, executions, greed. So nonviolence is not passivity. It's active love, pursuing the truth of our common unity and standing up and resisting the structures and systems of violence and death. Persistently reconciling with every human being on the planet, always bringing people together. Allowing the God of peace to disarm our hearts of the roots of violence, that we can be instruments of God's disarming love. Practicing unconditional, non-retaliatory, all-encompassing, universal love. Isn't that great? They're looking at me like, this guy's had too much coffee. This is just, and that's probably true, but okay, here's the one catch. There is no cause, however noble, no matter what they tell us for the rest of our lives, for which you and I will ever again support the taking of a single human life. No. We just got to kill Hitler. No, we'll kill Noriega. No, we'll kill Saddam. No, I will hunt down and kill Osama bin Laden. No. Nonviolence draws a boundary line in the sand. We do not kill people who kill people to show that you shouldn't kill people. We do not use the methodology of violence to end violence. The art of nonviolence is actually the willingness to give your life to stop the killing. It's very, very, very tough. Anybody can be violent, but it's very hard to be nonviolent, and that's the spiritual life. That was the point, I thought, Rebecca, of the church. Jesus trying to get us to be nonviolent like him. And I think about these things all the time, and so what does that mean? Well, we're addicted to violence, maybe one way of putting it. And tonight's where the church is should be like an AA group. Tonight's a meeting of Violence Anonymous. I'm your speaker. Hi, I'm John. I'm addicted to violence. You go, hi, John. Tell you my sad story. Trying to make restitution. We're turning to our higher power. And we're trying to become sober people. Now, of nonviolence. That's true. Yeah, it worked. So Daniel Berrigan said the first time I met him, 35 years ago, I mean, he was a poet and his use of language was so incredible. He said the problem is, only Daniel Berrigan could say this, is death. We are addicted to death as a social methodology. Death as a social methodology. I don't know if we find that helpful. That we bring death to good people, as if that's a normal way to live life. You see how Dan thought? And that reminds me of my favorite poem I was telling Steve. Edna St. Vincent Millay, you remember her from the 1920s? She was great. She had a line, I shall die, but that is all I shall do for death. Isn't that great? That's what we're talking about. That's what the church is supposed to be about. That's what to be a human being is about, to work for a world where we don't bring people to death, where we're no longer addicted to death or use death as a social methodology to resolve our problems. It's not necessarily that we're talking about a utopia. Nonviolence provides the tools to resolve conflicts peacefully. That's what's so exciting. Gandhi says nonviolence is a power more powerful than all the weapons of the world combined. But I've been trying to reflect on this, and that's why I wrote this book, Steve, The Nonviolent Life. So after studying Gandhi and King for 35 years, see, Carol uses the Vincent van Gogh motif here, but it's New Mexico on the bottom. It's a local artist. Steve's wife, Carol, is a Vincent van Gogh expert. I've proposed that nonviolence requires 3 simultaneous attributes. Okay, we're talking about working for a world, a new culture of nonviolence. I think Gandhi and King propose a holistic nonviolence. You have to do all 3 of these. I'll just say a word about each. First, you gotta be really nonviolent to yourself. Piece of cake. Second, you gotta be meticulously nonviolent toward every human being on the planet and all the creatures and the earth itself. No problem. And third, you also have to have one foot in the global grassroots movements of nonviolence that are changing the world. Well, I can see you didn't like that. And see, I think we're good at maybe one of those. And some of us might be good at even 2. But very few do the holistic nonviolence of Gandhi. So there's like, there's a lot of people in the church, Steve, who are really nice. or really working on being at peace with themselves. And not doing anything about catastrophic climate change, 800 million people starving, and the wars. Do you see what I mean? That's not the Christian message or the holistic nonviolence of Gandhi and King. I remember 35 years ago giving a speech in Connecticut, the big church, and the woman said, I'm going to spend the rest of my life being perfectly peaceful with myself. And when I achieve that, then I'll get involved in the world. And I thought, that's not our way. But it can be Americans. It's a very bourgeois trap. On the far other hand, there's a lot of us who are activists. And we're mean and angry and we're committed for peace. And it doesn't work. And is that the myth of the 60s, that the young students got involved in the Vietnam War? Right. And anger doesn't sustain you for the long haul. It doesn't work. And so, but you don't see any of that with Gandhi and King. And I've really pursued this. That's why I think we have to do all 3. So how are you doing with it? Number 1, really nonviolent to yourself. And this is what the Dalai Lama has been talking about, that we in the United States, we hate ourselves. He said we're specialists at it compared to the rest of the world. No, it's a serious thing. And how can we as peacemakers non-cooperate with our own inner violence? Cultivate interior nonviolence. This is what Thomas Merton was getting at, and Gandhi. To be nonviolent to ourselves, not to beat ourselves up. You know, Thich Nhat Hanh calls it looking deeply within. What's going on? Not judging ourselves, just understanding and always trying to go deeper into interior nonviolence. We want to radiate personally the peace we seek politically for the world. Okay, secondly, meticulous interpersonal nonviolence. Well, how's that going for you? So hard. And you know, we're all for peace, but there's deep down somebody we'd like to get back at with a little revenge. I'm just saying, you know. And it's so strange. And the Buddhists, they say that person, think who's the one person you have most trouble with in your whole life? A parent, a brother or sister, the Pope or the president or somebody. That person becomes your teacher because, first of all, they're exposing your violence. So how do you nonviolently work with difficult people? Well, you have to learn the methodology of nonviolence and train yourself in nonviolence. That's why we need trainings. In the group I work with, we do trainings in nonviolence all the time to learn to begin to be able to respond nonviolently, instinctively to people. These are very good things. To resolve conflict nonviolently. Violence is very easy. Nonviolence requires real creativity, you know, and really to be human and to help others be human and reclaim their humanity. Or also the creatures of the earth and the earth itself. How can we be more and more nonviolent to the earth? That's part of the second attribute. The third is to be part of the grassroots movement. Now, it's very clear now, Howard Zinn taught us this. The only way positive change generally happens throughout human history is bottom-up grassroots movements. And in our own culture, and right here in Vermont, we know that from the abolitionists, the suffragists, the labor movement, the civil rights movement, the anti-Vietnam War movement, beginning of the environmental movement, and now the whole world is moving. Our friend Walter Wink documented, he claimed 2/3 of the human race were personally involved in grassroots movement of nonviolence. 85 nonviolent revolutions in the last 40 years. Now there's this incredible book by Erica Chenoweth out, a major social scientist, one of the leading intellectuals on the planet, who studied every national conflict from 1900 to 2006. The book is like reading the phone book. It's all charts and graphs, but we know through social analysis and statistical research that Gandhi was right. Where nonviolence is tried, it works. Where violence is used to resolve national, international conflict, it leads to further violence. And nonviolence actually then leads to greater democracy. It's amazing. So we have to all be part of these grassroots movements. And the theory is that nobody can do everything, but everybody can do something. Everybody is needed. Everybody can make a difference. So, when I think of a culture of nonviolence, I think that means, first of all of us have to non-cooperate with violence, withdraw from violence, and, if you will, resist the culture of violence. So we don't support war, pay for war, encourage war, preach war, send our kids off to war, praise war, pray to the false gods of war, and so forth, support the churches that support war. And we are no longer part of a culture of war or death and the metaphors of death, all these other forms of violence. On the other hand, we're lifting up a vision of what we could become, using this Gandhian Kingian language of nonviolence. One of the things, I was talking with Steve is about pursuing, like what I've been talking about with politicians is in the country is an image of nonviolence. In other words, what would a nonviolent Vermont look like? That's a good way to look at it. And what would a nonviolent country, a nonviolent world look like? So the group that I work with, I have some brochures I can give you out at the book table there, is called Campaign Nonviolence, and we have several projects I'll just mention. One is we do a whole week of action every September. We've just finished it now, based around International Peace Day, and we're trying to get people involved in the grassroots movement. So up until this weekend, we had, you don't even know this, but 758 demonstrations around the country covering every state. We're against everything. I know, it's totally over the top. And by that I mean we're connecting the dots. We're getting people to say, it's no longer good just to pick the one issue that your group is working on. We're against racism and police brutality and mass incarceration, but against the poverty and the corporate greed that's affecting your community, as well as the war and the money going into drones, as well as the environmental destruction in your local community. So people were coming together across racial, religious lines and class lines in every city in the country, also upholding Dr. King's vision of a culture of peace and nonviolence. And we documented every single one. It's amazing. And you were telling me that there were 3 or 4 that happened here in Vermont. Maybe you can tell us later. It's wonderful. And our website is campaignonviolence.org. We hope to have 1,000 events next year for International Peace Day Week. We've also launched the Nonviolent Cities Project. These are actual programs to work for a culture of peace and nonviolence. I was speaking at a place called Carbondale, Illinois. And the group took me to dinner beforehand. And I was saying, what are you all working on? They said, well, we've been doing peace and justice work here for years, and now we've given up on it. And I was going, oh, now we formed Nonviolent Carbondale. And I remember going, excuse me? We have our meetings once a month before the city council meets. And as activists, we've broken beyond our group. We invite all kinds of people from civic society, if you will, on a grassroots level. And we have been talking with the city council about what would Carbondale look like if it became a culture of nonviolence. And eventually the city council members are going, that's not a bad idea. And then they started meeting with the police department and going, well, actually, I guess that's what Martin Luther King wanted of us. And then they started meeting in the schools. How are you teaching nonviolence in the school? And that started taking root. Then the head of the library system is now the head of the committee. And she is nonviolence in the library all the time. Then they with healthcare. Then they went to the poorest blocks where there was gun violence. How can we get rid of guns and violence? And they are on a journey. So we've launched this throughout the whole country since March. And I have 35 cities I'm working with right now that are using this idea of creating like a nonviolent Manchester, nonviolent Cincinnati, nonviolent Fresno. The city council was meeting on Thursday in Fresno. And the idea is the vision, lifting up a vision of what the community can be. So we're talking about a culture of peace and nonviolence. And I think if things are as bad as we think they are, and I think they're much worse than we realize, one of the casualties of this culture is the loss of the imagination. People can't even imagine a culture of nonviolence, a world without war. You say that walking down the streets of New York and people go, well, you're just nuts. But, being here in New England, I love the abolitionists. Have you studied them, Steve? There's a great book about William Lloyd Garrison and many others, but this guy, they're just nuts as far as I'm concerned. You think I'm over the top? Read The Abolitionists. This is my impersonation of William Lloyd Garrison. Excuse me, America. You can't even say it with a straight phrase. Tonight, we are announcing the abolition of slavery. So are you nuts? Are you crazy? There's always been slavery. No. There's always been slavery. It's in the Bible. Some people aren't people. There's nothing you can do. And this guy said, no. A new world is coming. A new world of equality. And he reclaimed the imagination of what it means to be a human being and lifted up a vision of the culture. We've got to do something even harder than he did and those people did. We have to stand on the shoulders of our own ancestors here in Vermont. And what we're saying is, buckle your seatbelts. Excuse me, United States. We are announcing here tonight in Manchester the abolition of war. The abolition of poverty and hunger and racism and sexism and torture and executions and nuclear weapons and the destruction of the environment. And my whole life I've been saying that, and everybody says, well, you're just nuts. And I say, no. A new world is coming. A new world of nonviolence. This is what Martin Luther King did. I have a dream of what we could be. We have to, especially us in the churches, help people reclaim the public imagination of what we could be. Help people imagine a new world of nonviolence. And as we lift up this vision, because we're in total blindness, we give each other vision again. We've been blinded by our violence and by the media, the culture of war's propaganda. We can become nonviolent people. Well, Gandhi said we'll actually then begin to reimagine God and discover that God is nonviolent. And then we can become people of nonviolence. This is what I think we're trying to do. I was telling Steve, I discovered this sentence in one of the very obscure writings of Gandhi, where Gandhi said the kingdom of God is nonviolence. That's a deep thought. And one thing to say about Jesus was he had a great imagination. He was one of the most visionary people who ever lived. And he's always saying, how can I describe the kingdom of God? My experience is that working as the director of the Fellowship of Reconciliation, the largest interfaith peace group in the country and the world, this was in the late 90s, I learned from 10,000 faith-based activists that nonviolence is at the center of every religion. I'm convinced now. Judaism has this spectacular vision of shalom, which I quoted from Isaiah. They say the day was coming, there'll be no more death. It's in Isaiah 11. It's incredible. Hinduism is embodied by Gandhi. Islam means peace. I know thousands of Muslims radically committed to nonviolence because of the Quran. I'm going, no, that's not what George W. Bush said. And the Buddhists, now they're just over the top. They're saying, Thich Nhat Hanh says, we're going to be so nonviolent, we're only going to breathe in peace. Every breath is peace. We're going to show compassion to all sentient beings. On second thought, let's not stop there. Let's show compassion to the earth and the air and the sky. Gandhi says even Jesus is nonviolent, and therefore that even Christianity is about nonviolence. I thought that'd make you laugh because it's just so ridiculous. Even the Baptist Church is about nonviolence. Dare I say, Roman Catholicism is about nonviolence. It's incredible to think when you. So everything Jesus said is perfect nonviolence. Gandhi read from the Sermon on the Mount every morning and every evening the last 45 years of his life. Did you know that? That's why I've just written this book, The Beatitudes of Peace, to unpack what Gandhi learned. It's a book about the Sermon on the Mount. It's amazing. He said these are the greatest teachings of nonviolence in all of human writing. I want to be a person of nonviolence, so I have to read it as a handbook. And he's not Christian, Rebecca. And remember in the movie, he's late for the prayer service and he's shot. He would have been reading from Matthew 5 and the Bhagavad Gita chapter 2, which is another spectacular teaching of nonviolence. And then he's healing nonviolence. He's on his own campaign of nonviolence. And then he turns and marches to Jerusalem, wrecking everything, Jesus, going into the temple where the religious authorities are working with the empire to steal all the people's money in the name of God. And he turns over the tables of the banking system in nonviolent civil disobedience. Jesus doesn't hit anybody, hurt anybody, kill anybody, or drop any nuclear bombs. I just wanted to clarify that. But wow, this guy is not passive. This is active, public, creative, dangerous, revolutionary nonviolence. He's bringing down the whole system. That's the Christian way. And it's totally illegal. I wrote a book on this, Steve, because I've been doing civil disobedience so much.
Did you write this when you were in prison?
Yes. It's called The Sacrament of Civil Disobedience, and I studied the different civil disobedience of Jesus. And then I just came to the conclusion that everything he did was illegal. He was like a one-man crime wave walking through the Roman Empire. And I'll just end with a story this is about Jesus, because I was speaking like this 10 years ago in a church during the Iraq War, and calling people in the churches to create, if you claim to be a follower of this guy, you have to be a person of nonviolence, like Gandhi and King taught. And you're working for a new culture of nonviolence. And this lady raised her hand. I'll never forget it. It was incredible. And she said, John, this stuff about nonviolence is very interesting. Really intriguing was her word. And then she said, and peace? Peace? Me? Peace? Big fan of peace. But sometimes you just got to kill somebody. That's what she said, and everybody in the church went, well, she's got a point. If that's what you think, or your relatives think, or you're up against, that the church was right in 315, when Constantine the emperor supposedly converted to Christianity, and he literally threw out the Sermon on the Mount, legalized Christianity, everybody can now be a soldier for me, turns to the pagan Cicero, begins to come up with the just war theory. Then St. Augustine writes, in the city of God, the best way to love your enemies may be to kill them. They'll be grateful for it. And then by the Middle Ages, we have the conditions for the just war theory. Then we had holy crusades where we got to kill millions of the heathens for Jesus. And we churchmen burned women at the stake, and we all had slaves. And now the priest and the minister in Los Alamos bless the nuclear bombs at Los Alamos. If that's what you think, go to what happens next in the story. Here's Jesus in the upper room, takes the bread, takes the cup, and says, my body broken for you, my cup my blood shed for you. If he were a good American, what should he have said? Go break their bodies for me. Go shed their blood for me. That's the logic of war and empire. No, my blood shed for you, my body broken for you. Do this. It's the new covenant of nonviolence. There he is in the Garden of Gethsemane. Here come the Roman soldiers. And what does St. Peter think? St. Peter's thinking, oh my God, they're going to get the Holy One. They're going to kill him. I got to do something. And in his mind, he's going, if there was ever a just war, if violence was ever divinely sanctioned on all of human history, if there was ever a moment to kill for a holy cause, this is it. And he's right. Kill to protect our guy. And just as he goes to kill to protect the Holy One, the commandment comes down. Put down the sword. Friends, those are the last words of Jesus to the church before he died. It's the last thing the community of women and men around him heard him say. Think about it. It's right there in the gospel. And I submit it's the first time they understood who this guy is. Peter's had 3 years of retreats on nonviolence, and he's going, this hippie is so full of all this love, peace, compassion. He's not going to defend himself with violence, which means we don't, which means we're out of here. And they all abandon him. And Gandhi, who's, I think, the greatest Christian theologian, says Jesus goes deeper into nonviolence. They're killing him. No anger, no bitterness, no revenge, no retaliation. Dies in perfect nonviolence, forgiving his killers. He comes back, rises from the dead. Peace be with you. Now you walk the road of nonviolence. You announce the coming of the kingdom of God, a new culture of nonviolence. Work for a nonviolent Vermont, a nonviolent country, a nonviolent world. Do your part to end death as a social methodology and practice and live the Sermon on the Mount. And together, let's abolish war and poverty and killing and create a more peaceful planet for future generations. This is what you've been doing, and I encourage you to keep at it. Thanks for listening, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
How do you keep your joy when there's so much evil
Why
and so
don't you
on?
repeat the question?
Oh, he's saying, how do you keep your joy in such a moment? You know, I wrote about that in this book and the other book because it's a very serious question, you know, about how do we sustain each other for the lifelong haul. That's what I heard you saying. With community, you can do more. Dan said if you wanted to be hopeful, you have to do hopeful things. You know, certainly you have to be contemplative. People of meditation and quiet time, and I've learned that from day one, and I take serious quiet time in prayer every day. My prayer level is very kindergarten. I sit with Jesus. I can say this because we're in a Baptist church. And I tell him my problems, and he says, you're doing fine, I love you. And I say, you say that to everybody. No, you know what I mean. And I get new energy. And then, you know, with friends, you have friends and community and action. But joy is very interesting. In the Beatitudes, Jesus says, don't practice these two emotions, practice these two emotions. And we all, especially smart activists, have them all wrong. You've read the Sermon on the Mount every day of your lives, I hope. It was only Gandhi who discovered this. Blessed are those who mourn. So we're supposed to be people of grief, but we don't do that. You have heard it said, thou shalt not kill. I say, don't even get angry. No, we are angry. Well, Jesus, maybe he's at least, could he be at least as smart as we are? Is that flippant? Be reconciled is the teaching there. And then don't be afraid. And then, blessed are you when they persecute you, insult you, call you every name. Rejoice and be glad. Now you're really like Gandhi and Dr. King and the prophets. So there's grief and joy are the two emotions that we're supposed to practice as peacemakers. and not go into fear and anger. Well, we're good at anger and we're good at being afraid, but we have to grow up. And can I tell a story about this?
Please do. Yep.
So I'm a big name dropper, so you'll forgive me, but I saw this with Archbishop Tutu. And maybe it was 10 years ago, there was a gathering in Denver. Did I tell you this? Do you know that? Of 10 Nobel Peace Prize winners. And they were each allowed to bring one person. It was a week-long event, incredible. And my friend is Mairead Maguire, the Nobel Peace Prize winner from Belfast, the greatest peacemaker on the planet as far as I'm concerned. Incredible person. She invited me to go. And we lived together, the 10 Nobel laureates and their 10 people, for a week in this top floors of the big posh hotel. One day they spoke to 25,000 people in the stadium, one day to 10,000 young people, one day to 5,000 women in the Denver Opera House, and then one day filming for the BBC, a program that was eventually seen by 1 billion people. So we were part of all that. So we're in the green room at the stadium. It's a room with a big couch and a circle, and they have everything lined up, and there's food. Here's the Dalai Lama, here's Archbishop Tutu, and Rigoberta Menchú, and all the big, great peacemakers and their friends, and we're making small chit-chat. And you know how when the conversation goes down, it suddenly got quiet. We're all sitting there, and the Dalai Lama turns to Tutu and says, "You know, Tutu, you have the biggest mouth on the whole planet. Everybody really hates you, including me. And everybody wants to kill you, including me. And somebody should. So I might as well do it." Boom! And with that, he lunges at Tutu, grabs him by the neck, and starts throttling Tutu. And then Tutu goes with his tongue hanging out. And then, like, without missing a beat, they both fell on the floor. And we were horrified, and we look on the floor, and it was like out of the movies. Their feet were up in the air, their hands were on their stomach, their eyes were shut, and their mouths were open. And they were laughing so hard. Tears were coming down their face. And they're laughing, we're going, "Oh!" And just then the guy walked in the room and said, "You're on." And they stood up and walked out and spoke to 25,000 people. And I said, I want that. I want to be like them. I learned. Tutu has been under death threat since he was 13. Every day of his life. He's very sick right now. And when I went and was with him for a day in South Africa about 2 years ago, he immediately got into that. I know him, but I've also studied his life. Joan Baez says Martin Luther King was the funniest person she ever met. Do you think about that when you think of Dr. King? So much joy. Martin Sheen says Daniel Berrigan, Martin's met everybody in the world. Funniest person you ever met, but he's Daniel Berrigan. But personally, there's so much joy. And Mother Teresa was like that. Gandhi was like the Maharishi. He was just giggling all the time. I mean, these people are kind of embarrassing. But they should be angry, and they're changing the world. So I go to see Tutu, and I walk into the room. This is 2 years ago in Cape Town. No hello. I've just flown all around the world. He's this big. He walks up to me and grabs me by the collar and goes, "John, you and I have to work for peace and justice till the day we die." Are there any questions? Isn't that incredible? Being a smart aleck, and he knows I am, but that's because he is too, I said, "Oh, come on. How am I going to do that?" And I said, there's a nickname for him. I said, "How do you do it?" And this is when you meet these great people. He came right into my face, and he goes, "John, I cry." This is classic saints. And I'm taken back, and he goes, "I have cried every single day of my life since I was 5. With that, he burst into tears. It's just what met him. And he says, "I cry, I'm grieving because what we do to our sisters and brothers around the planet. And we have a God who weeps, John." And then he says, "I laugh. I'm full of joy because life is so wonderful. So I cry and I rejoice, John. So I'm learning to cultivate grief and joy, to make that my practice. And I'm serious about that, to take time to grieve what we're doing to our sisters and brothers, to the creatures on the earth. That can open our hearts into compassion and love, and that leads to action. And rejoice, to cultivate joy much deeper than whatever happiness would be. You know, a real inner joy about God and life and resurrection and the wonder of it all. Vermont, such good friends, everybody doing their little bit. It's wonderful. I really thank you for all you do for peace and justice and for upholding this vision for a culture of nonviolence and transitional Manchester and Vermont and America. And just let's keep at it. And till the day we die. Thanks for listening, everybody.
All right, I'd like to invite you to join.